Carl, will you please do the Pledge of Allegiance for us?
Everyone stand, face the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The roll call is Carl Benninger,
Here?
Isis Calvario. Here. Janelle McLaughlin. Tom Morrissey has requested an excused absence, and Dan Origel, I have not heard from him. Desi Reyes.
Here.
Gil Summon.
Here.
Gary Wood.
Here.
Madam, you have a quorum.
At this time, we do not have minutes from our last.
There you go.
Do we have any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to minutes.
At this time, we have no minutes from our last month meeting. Is that correct, Laurie?
That's correct.
Will those minutes be emailed to us, or will they be available at the next meeting?
They'll be held till the next meeting when you can have an opportunity to review them ahead of time and comment on them at the next meeting.
So at this time, we proceed to new business. These little buttons are new, everybody. At this time, I'd like to talk about the city tree planting services, the reforestation, the service of the trees, and the education program moving forward for 2016 and 17.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. We do need to go back and excuse Tom Morrissey's excused absence request. So if I can receive a vote on whether you are excusing his absence, because he has requested an excused absence.
I make a motion, we excuse Tom. Second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. The motion passed, and you can proceed. Thank you.
It's a presentation from Public Works on.
Last month, we had asked for the Public Works to review and provide a planting budget or a review of what it would take to come back to a position that our trees were, let's say, 5 years ago when the city had such low budgets. So this is a recommendation action, a motion requesting the city manager to request supplementary funding from the city council to fill tree vacancies and for ongoing maintenance costs and education. So I believe we have a presentation from Public Works.
Yes, Madam Chairman. I guess you said we have a presentation from Public Works. We don't have a presentation on the subject. I think the recommendation was that you had a number of recommendations, and if you come up with each one, and the ETAC can vote on it, and that would be ETAC's position, and then once the ETAC tell us to proceed with that, we will proceed with with making these recommendation to the city manager, and in turn, city manager make the recommendation to council for additional budget or any other resources that is required to, move these items forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I passed out to my fellow board members the ETAC presentation of May 12th by the Public Works regarding tree service updates. And does everyone have a copy of that? And I have extra copies for anyone in the audience that would like it. But this was provided by Public Works to the ETAC organization. In this document, it reviews the condition of our trees throughout Santa Ana. And the discussion was that we had about 4,700 trees that were in poor condition, 271 trees that are dead, 341 vacant tree wells, and 84 stumps that had not been ground. At this time, we have 177 trees that are in stress. Over the last 3 years, we had asked for how many trees. We asked for a 5-year review of how many trees had been planted. And it looked like from on your last page of this presentation that in 2012 there were 253 trees planted, 2013 218 trees, and 2014 247 trees. Now, during this period of time, the drought has continued as well as budget concerns. So in the years of 2015 and 16, an average of 40 trees have been planted versus the average of 250 over the years. In the minutes of last month's meeting, we were discussing asking for additional funds. We were told that there was $50,000 in funds for new planting and that these monies would be definitely used in 2016-17, and that would be 166 trees, because within this report it states that planted tree is approximately $300. So at this time, we are asking for 341 tree wells to be replanted at an amount of $102,000. We're asking for 271 dead trees to be cut, because we have not been, as a city, cutting our dead trees unless they are hazardous. So we're asking for the blight of the dead trees to be cut and a replacement to that dead tree for the 271, which would be approximately $81,000. If you remove the 84 stumps at $300 a tree replacement, if it can be replaced, that's $25,200. So we are asking for $208,200 versus the existing budget of $50,000. So that's an additional $158,000 to bring ourselves up to the same standards we were in 2014. I have a motion of my ETAC fellow board members to review that number and agree on that request. That's $208,000 with the subtracting of the $50,000 existing budget, which would be $158,000.
I'm going to second that motion so we can have a discussion on it.
Now we're open for discussion.
This is Danelle Mercado. I just need to I was trying to write it down as quickly as you were stating it. Can you please review it again as far as the numbers so I can confirm them?
If you go to your first page of your May 12th presentation that Public Works submitted to ETAC.
Actually, Janelle, it's the numbers, the last numbers. what you're looking to
Okay,
put in
so
motion.
that's 341 tree wells that are empty, and at $300 a tree, which is the amount that's stated within this report, that calculates out to 102,000. Then we have 271 dead trees, which calculates out to 81,000. Please check my math.
I will.
And then we have 84 dead tree stumps. That's 25,200. So the request was for the $208,200 to replace those number of trees, which would be, my understanding, your budget is already for 50,166 trees. So the difference is 158,000.
Correct. The other thing we need to include that is watering for 3 years of the trees, the new trees.
In the meetings regarding the watering of the trees, we were told, because on the May 12th, there's a calculation at the bottom that says young trees, 2-day cycle, 2-man crew at the trees, 1,000 a day, 2,000 for 2-day cycle. And when I asked how much per tree the water cost,
Right.
I was told that Public Works would figure and calculate that. And that was not a request that needed to be in my request as ETAC to Public Works. Is that correct?
Thank you. If you just let us know how many trees needs to be replanted, and then I think we have some general calculation how much it's going to be, and we can go back and verify those numbers. That includes the new trees, that includes watering, and the maintenance. So we might give you some idea today how much would that be, so the commission would know the range that they're asking. Also, I'd like to add that after ETAC votes on this would be position of ETAC. Basically, we're going to council, and then we're saying that ETAC had determined that this amount of money be allocated for this work, additional amount. So you have to also consider the priority of ETAC, where that's going to be for trees. Later on, if the ETAC decides that they want to add the budget on, let's say, sidewalks repair or some other situation, we're going to have to do the same thing as well.
So from our last month's, we were given our ordinances that ETAC regarding trees reports directly to the city council. And in that light, this is what we're making our request. There's more points to this. This is just for the immediate planting of the existing trees that would bring us back to a 2-year level plan of what we used to do. So the request totally will be a reforesting, a service, and an education program. This is just the reforestation component piece that I'm asking my fellow ETAC. I'd like to also remind everyone that last month, if we had our minutes, it would show ETAC made a motion for $50,000 of supplemental additional funding. So this is replacing that in the minutes of last month, that the request comes up to the $208,200 in total.
Is that the number you have?
That's the number without the water.
Without water.
It's just planting, that's removing, planting, but then it doesn't have the ongoing maintenance costs.
Yeah, what would you estimate ongoing maintenance cost for a tree? We couldn't figure out on the watering cycle what it really cost the city.
We would have to have our contractor do that work because we do not have the resources and staff to perform the additional watering for that many trees. And it's approximately, as you know, $500 a day. They do about 100 trees, so that's $5 a tree. We want to water it once a week because it's a new tree. So it comes to, I mean, if you just go round it off to 700 trees, new trees, it's like $696 with the numbers you just gave me. It's about $504,000 over a 3-year period because that's what we like to, on a new tree, we want to nurture it for 3 years before it's the property owner then, takes responsibility of watering. So there's that, and then for trimming costs, because we trim every 3 years, for the 700 trees, it's about $88,000 for the first 6 years.
Right now on the table is only a replanting, and it's the cost of replanting from the information that you gave us on May 12th. So if we request, perhaps at the next meeting, your total budget that's required to go forward to the city council for that, but now we're just looking for that number of trees as broken down to be replanted, and that's the motion that's on the table.
I have a question. In the calculations, what I'm understanding is that it's 300 plant per tree.
I believe that's the number that's stated in this May 12th report.
But so what I'm saying is planting 24-inch boxes costs 300, but planting larger boxes costs more. Will any of these trees need to be?
Upgraded to a larger box.
Yes.
Don't know the information given to us. We just went off from the 300 number, and we used that as a standard number.
Yeah, our standard is the 24-inch box, so we always plant the 24-inch box on new trees. So 300 is the price.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the trees get trimmed every 3 years, but the queen palms get trimmed twice a year, correct?
We have a motion on the table right now.
I thought you had opened it up for discussion.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, the queen palms, it's not twice a year, it's once a year. The palm trees are once a year.
Once a year.
Yeah, so
Instead
if
of
there's a
3
palm
years.
tree in the plantings, that would be annually. I just did a general, for the majority of our trees, it's every 3 years, 2 to 3 years, depending on the species.
Are the queen palms every year starting early, or is it later in their maturity? I'm assuming we don't have to trim them when they're...
Yeah, maybe in the beginning, but I don't have that answer.
Okay.
I don't want to give you the wrong information.
So, Madam Chairperson, my recommendation would be to calculate the entire cost of planting and maintenance for each section. So we request for the right amount of money so we'll be able to take care of the trees as well. Because just planting it and not having budget for watering and maintenance doesn't make a good practice.
So
Are you suggesting, Fred, to come back at the next meeting to discuss the?
We have two choices. We can come back with a more precise number next week, or we can give you a range today. And then if you want to move it faster, we can give you a range today, and the estimate would be within those range, and we make the arrangement to take it to council and request for additional budget. It's up to you.
Because there's also another part of this also, and that's concerned about what we do to train the public to maintain the trees. I know it was discussed at one of our meetings about, I think Claremont was the city, or was it San Francisco, to have the bags, the people put in water to help on the parkways. I mean, I thought that was an excellent idea to talk about help as far as watering goes. I don't know, there's no, in our budget right now, there's no public training at all, is there?
Other than when we originally planted a tree and giving them an information sheet on, how to water the tree. But that's one of the things that we found over the years is on newly planted. Sorry. One of the things that we found on newly planted trees is if they don't take care of them, they don't mature, and we end up having to pull out trees in the first year. So that's why we we water the first 3 years to make sure it establishes itself. The bags are a good idea, but again, they have to use them and water them. So then that takes the responsibility off of us those first 3 years. However, if they're not following through, even with the marketing campaign, et cetera, we'll lose trees. So it's not our recommendation from a standpoint of the parkways.
So in this review, we have not been cutting dead trees, as Waldo had said in previous meetings, unless a neighbor asks for the tree to be cut or it's a hazardous tree.
Well, hazardous trees are immediate. There's no
Correct.
right, so that's not a question. But no, we're removing trees on that list that now that we have that inventory. We're scheduling it into our routine maintenance, but it's going to take us all of this year to really get all those trees down.
So
by our
there
staff.
is a budget to remove all of these 271 trees? Because to my memory, it was not totally budgeted for this coming year.
It's not a budget item because it's our staff that does the removals. But again, because we're short-staffed, it will take us all of the year and some possibly to remove 286 trees. If we were to have the contractor do it, we're talking, like you said, the amount you mentioned before, the 102,000. That's the contractor, and they could actually, with that amount, we could remove them sooner. But we
The
are planning on
102,000 was for the empty tree wells of the 341 trees. So you're saying the 81,000 for the dead trees of 271 is the removal, replant, water at $300?
No, 300 is just the planting. That's not the removal. The removal would be an additional amount.
Just so
Of
we
the
understand,
286.
Danelle, just so we understand the figures, if, does the city plant trees? Does the city employees, any city employees plant the trees?
Sorry, can you say that?
Okay. Are trees planted by city employees?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a charge for that?
Trees that our staff plant?
Yes.
No, other than the labor, obviously, and the cost of the tree.
Okay. So if we have, say, the 341 trees we want to replace, right now, by your standards, how much would that be planted by city versus a contractor?
We would have the contractor plant them.
You would?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We don't
The
have the resources
$300
to plant
was a
that many
contractor
trees.
price.
How many trees do you think the city will plant with it using its own people?
Well, we usually have our contractor plant trees. That's where the 166 that
Oh, I
you
see.
started with the 50,000.
Okay, so you don't use any
That's
city
what the
maintenance
budget
people
is.
to plant trees? Okay.
Correct.
Do we have any trees in our yard that we're growing? Because in years past, we had trees started and ready to plant in our yard.
We do, I don't know, we don't have an abundance of trees because we're growing them to be a 24-inch box, but there's not a significant amount that could make a dent in that number.
So they're all purchased trees.
Yes.
Any questions from the board?
Let's see here. The so if you're planting these new trees, it'll probably be a few years before they start getting trimmed, correct? So why do we have to calculate trimming costs right now, where maybe it'll take them 10 years to where they'll be able to be trimmed, and 10 years from now, the calculation that you're doing today, it's not going to be what it's like 10 years when they will need trimming. So I don't see the.
No, you're correct. We wouldn't trim until after the first 3 years. So that's what I had stated. It's in the 6-year period. It would be $92,000 for the 700 trees.
To trim.
Right, correct. So it's not an immediate expense.
Correct.
Correct.
So I just, I can see planting the trees right now, and because we've never planted them, we won't have a budget to trim them. But I would support the motion your motion, Madam. Thank you.
If I could just ask, when you were talking about the cost to water this amount of trees, 700 trees, and then the trimming, it came up to almost $600,000 over 3 years. If you divide that by, per year, that's almost the price of planting all these trees. It's over $200,000. So in my opinion, it would seem that planting a bunch of trees that we don't know if the funds are going to be there to maintain them would not be, wise in my opinion. We have to have a total number that the city would be willing to budget to to plant additional trees and maintain what they already have. So I would be less inclined to support it unless we have a total cost and know exactly what it's going to be.
So my understanding is you would like to put within this motion the 90,000 trimming that will take place 3 years from now?
No, I think it's, in general, it's also what does it take to properly water and maintain the trees? That's really the bigger number. That's, I think you said that was 504,000 over 3 years, so that's what, about 170,000 per year? That's really the number that needs to go in here as well.
So you're amending the motion of the 208,000 to include what number, sir?
No, I'm just saying I'm not really inclined to support the motion, but that, I can record that on a vote, because I don't think it's going to properly address the situation, which is the city's not budgeting enough to take care of all the trees that the city has, or to install additional trees, I think would cause additional problems. I mean, I drive throughout the city, as we all do daily, and I see so many signs of stress and distress, from parks to trees to all aspects of the city. And in my opinion, asking the city council to appropriate $208,000 to plant 700 trees is not really looking at the entire issue of what we should request on an annual basis to plant trees and water trees and maintain trees. So I'm really just trying to put the focus on what we would ask the city council to appropriate in a budget annually going forward, besides just doing it for this one time. So that's my only point.
So it's a three-pronged process, because we had the discussions in the meetings talking about adding watering as well. That's my second point to the planting. I introduced the planting because the discussion of the deep root watering, let's say of the sycamores on 17th Street, is being done, but they're still in extreme distress. So therefore, a part of this ETAC promotion and report we're going to ask for City Council is to add additional deep root watering to existing trees that are in stress. And what I was told, and I will ask Fred, is don't worry about the cost of the watering. We'll calculate it out and give you back that number to go to City Council. This was just a unit number. My mistake?
I apologize if I gave you that impression. We usually, in all our capital improvement projects, which that includes that, we calculate the cost of maintenance. And the cost of maintenance, and the rule of thumb is any kind of capital improvement, if you spend $1 on a planning, we spend $20 on a design and $100 on maintenance on every capital improvement projects. That's a rule of thumb. And for trees also, we have to really calculate the cost of watering and maintaining it, and we can spread it out. When we go to council, we'll say, look, trimming would be after 3 years, between 3 to 5, and they have an option to authorize that to release funds in those terms. But I think the proper way to introduce this to council would be total cost, which include maintenance. Because if you plant a tree and we won't be able to water it, and then somehow we have problems with other areas of our
So I'd like to
operation
share
of
in
the
this
problem.
discussion that we did have a tree meeting with Public Works, with Pedro, with Fred, and the city manager. It was the city manager's recommendation that we bring the request back to ETAC, and that he and Public Works would support what we asked for to present to City Council. So in a process of ask for the big package, negotiate to what possibly City Council would advise us as what they would like, but we were encouraged to ask for what we thought to bring the city back to the same standard it was. And we have the funds and the reserves to use this money for bringing blight down into our city. Because right now we have the blight of dead trees, stumps, and trees in stress. So that was the total understanding, is what can we do to reduce the level of blight and bring the city back and catch up to where it was in 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And the 700 trees will be the catch-up, which we have not spent that money, or Public Works has not spent that money. So that was why the number is at the 700 request, because they can always say no to the 700 and negotiate, because last month we had asked for 50, and that was a number that was just out of the air without judicial analyzation of this.
I recommend we amend the motion to specifically ask for the number of trees to be planted, including the cost of planting and ongoing maintenance, as opposed to requesting from council the specific budget amount to appropriate. So I would like to amend the motion to advise city council to appropriate the correct amount of funds for 725 trees and ongoing maintenance. And then in the staff report for that council item, I assume that the staff will include what the costs would look like and how that's broken out year to year.
I'm going to second that.
So, just to get clear, do you want us to bring the numbers back here, or just move it forward to council? Because I think the right way would be to determine the number of trees that you want to replant, and we go back and do the calculations, and when we prepare the staff report, we put the cost of each category that you're asking for, and we move forward. Or if you want, we can do the calculations, the numbers, and then bring it back here for discussion before we go to council.
So
That
I
would
just
be a
want the
longer route.
Correct. The understanding from our last month meeting was that this May 12th report was scheduled to go to City Council in the month of August. From our minutes of last month.
I think it was going to come here, not to City Council. May 12th?
Okay, the report of May 12th, right here, and in our minutes of last month, that I don't believe you attended that particular meeting, that this report that the Public Works presented to ETAC was moving forward to be presented at City Council. There was a discussion that ETAC member used the public comment for 3 minutes to go forward with it. And that was when last month Carl added the $50,000 and the request to this in a motion, and it was going in the month of August. So this is what I was understanding, that this was being presented.
I don't think, I didn't have an intention to take the report to council. The report is the status of our existing trees.
So how are you taking the report of the motion that ETAC was recommending $50,000 to augment the existing $50,000 budget? How is that going to council in August?
The $50,000 budget for tree replacement would be based on what we have, what the report shows, and we were going to just appropriate $50,000 and move that forward.
So Fred, at the last ETAC meeting, there was a vote to request council action to appropriate supplemental $50,000 for the budget. Mm-hmm. And so I think what Janelle's asking is how, once that vote and recommendation was made to City Council here at ETAC, how is the City Council going to hear about that vote? Will it be an agenda item? Will it be required of us to go to City Council during public comment? I think Janelle's asking for clarification on how exactly that's going to move forward from the last meeting.
Usually it goes as part of the budget process. It starts from February to all the way to July when the budget gets approved, and this gets incorporated into a budget.
This was
And then
a motion last ETAC meeting for a supplemental $50,000 appropriation, so it was outside of the budget process.
So
Not my
that's,
understanding, but we can do that also. We would.
so my understanding is that there's a revision of the budget the city manager spoke of in our tree meeting prior to this meeting, and to bring forward that number to him immediately of what the recommendation of ETAC was. And we were doing that at this meeting. So instead of delay, it is my recommendation that we move forward with that number, because he said there was a sense of urgency to combine that into his draft of revisions at this time.
Yeah, the $50,000 budget that was discussed, that was before the meeting with the city managers. Now, this is going to be, in any case, a city manager's recommendation. The ETAC would determine, and that your desire is to allocate whatever number it is for whatever purpose that is going to be approved today, and it will go to city manager and would be a city manager's recommendations backed by ETAC to the council. And it can be as part of the supplemental budget, which can be presented mid-year or any time, depending on the urgency of the situation, or it can be as part of the budget process. So that would be up to city manager to decide which would be the best way to go. But if your understanding is city manager says that it's going to be immediate, then he will push it forward immediately.
Madam Chair, there was a motion and a second, and so I'd like to vote on that amendment and then move forward to the next point.
May I have a vote on the amendment?
So the amendment, just to recap, was to amend the motion that we recommend to City Council to appropriate an appropriate amount of funds to plant and ongoing maintenance costs and watering for the number of trees required, 700 and, what is it? 700. To bring us back to pre-drought levels.
All those
So-
in favor?
Yeah, so you're determining the number of trees that needs to be planted, and that bring us to 2014 levels, and then we'll calculate the cost of planting and the maintenance. We'll take it to city manager and then move it to the council.
Correct. So this amends the motion to request a specific number of trees and maintenance rather than actual costs. Rather than recommending a certain amount be appropriated, we're recommending that a certain number of trees and their ongoing maintenance be planted and maintained.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'd like to repeat the motion, and because Carl had seconded it. So what I have is, what Jalad made the motion for is recommended an amendment to the motion from last month to recommend to City Council to appropriate funds for 700 trees and ongoing maintenance. And this is the part that was revised prior to Carl seconding it, to bring us back to pre-drought levels. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So amended. Thank you.
So was that a unanimous? Thank you very much. The next item is, we've talked over the last 6 months about education of our neighbors, and Public Works that in the past has done flyers or gas bill inserts to help us out in these drought conditions, because the trees in the front of each resident's house is the responsibility of that resident. And that we're not asking to water outside of our limits, but how to teach to water, and save trees by a deep root system. So one of the education component pieces was not only a print campaign, a neighbor campaign, but also a video. So we have a video today of what other cities have done, their city council members and their equal to ETAC commission have done to educate, to put on their Channel 3 equivalent, to go to neighborhood associations and bring forward an education program. So at this time, may I ask the secretary to play the video?
Madam Chair, is this all included under item D?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We have technical difficulties.
Stir? Did you get him? Yeah, just have just a few words. What that is it's a Boy Scout doing a report about a city. What a neat opportunity.
Thank you. This brings in not only an educational program to our citizens. I believe I've been at, let's say, Morrison Park Neighborhood Association meeting, and the city manager and our public works director were there. The first and foremost question was, our trees are dying in the medians. We see them every day. I know the statistics that we're looking at on this May 12th report seem different than when we're the residents driving up and down the street. I'd like to point out the purpose and the reason of that, such as 17th Street, where our sycamores are in extreme stress. We see 20, 30 sycamores looking down one of our streets. Now, maybe it's not a high percentage, but I calculated from the information that was given, we have 30% of our trees on the medians that are poor to fair condition. That's 30%. We turned off the water for the church grass, but we did not set up a program to water our trees other than one water, internal deep root system of watering our trees. So at our meeting, we talked about adding additional deep root watering to the schedule, because the water that normally would come from watering the church grass is the arm span of the tree, and it's missing that. So our city manager said to include perhaps this stressful that we have here. We have, 300 and some odd stressful trees, and more of the trees that are stressful, additional watering. So incorporated in the city council request is the additional watering of the trees that are in stress condition. So how do you calculate that?
Madam Chairperson, you mentioned 34% of median trees are in distress.
If you take the information Pedro has given us, not on this May 12th, he calculated out in the email copy to you that the median trees, the request was how many median trees we have and what are the conditions of the median trees. That reported email, I think Danelle is shaking her head that she has, that 30% of the median trees today are in fair to poor condition. Not good condition, fair to poor. But we have no watering system for those median trees. And that's residential median trees or commercial median trees. So when in our meeting we had talked about offering better watering to those stressful trees at this time, or what additional services would we be doing for those trees that are in stress?
Okay. So basically, currently, and as you know, we're watering with our staff, injecting the mature trees and watering bermed into the younger trees. If we have, we had our contractor, our median contractor, give us a price to cap the sprinkler system, but leave the 3 sprinklers around the trees, open, so that the canopy, under the canopy. The price to do all the medians under that, which is what we got just this last week, is $252,000 to do that to all the medians, so that all the median trees will have the surrounding 3 sprinklers watering the tree. And then, or we could have the contractor, another price we have if we weren't to do it in-house, how we are now, which is every tree is getting watered, every median tree is getting watered 2 times a month, some 3 on the younger trees. That cost, for an annual cost, would be $312,000 to have a contractor do it. Because unfortunately, in the medians, it's a safety issue. It can't just be 1 truck. It has to, you probably have seen them out there, our staff. It's 2 trucks from a safety park, because you're on a high-speed arterial for the medians and parking in the fast lane. So it takes 2 trucks, 2 staff to water the median trees manually. the way we're doing it now. So those are the two prices, two amounts.
Nevertheless, we can include that as part of our recommendation to council if that's a desire of ETAG.
Any comments from my fellow board members?
Yeah. So this specifically, we're talking about the median trees because they do not have access to water from residents? I mean, okay. Does Public Works also deal with the trees that are inside of city parks? Or does the Parks Department handle that?
No, we do not. We're not responsible for the parks trees. Was that your question?
Yes. Okay, I'll bring that up later then. Okay, thank you.
Question, we talked about replacing medium grass with a drought-resistant shrubbery or even some hardscape. In those plans, does that include also just changing sprinklers around so the trees get watered?
Yes, if there was improvements made in the medians for the drought tolerant, the tree watering would be included in that as far as getting the water to the trees.
And where do we stand right now? Has that been approved by council to do that on the mediums?
No, it has not gone back to council for approval for the medians, for the drought tolerant part of it.
The cost of conversion of median grass to drought tolerant adds up to $15 million for the entire city. The recommendation was to do it gradually as we save some water and save cost of watering the grass, and that's the plan at this point. So we just putting the saving aside for watering the medians, and when we get to a certain point, we're going to do the drought tolerant conversion and then move forward. This is a slow process without having the proper funds, obviously.
So I'd like to remind my fellow board members that there was a presentation that medians were handled on a matrix basis, and that the city analyzed that there was the Harbor Boulevard. That was the only median in the city that was going to get the water system corrected and drought tolerant planted, and all the other medians residentially and commercially throughout the city had no budget or plan at this time to do any watering or any change to as they look today, with going in 4 years of stress.
So I have a question about the numbers you gave to now. You're saying on an annual basis it costs about $300,000 to go around watering the median trees?
That's correct. If we were to contract out.
And what are we currently spending on in-house labor to do that?
I don't actually have an amount, but it is being done in-house. So our current, budget is taking care of watering the medians, which we weren't doing 2 years ago, but we are doing now as a result of the drought.
It just seems to me that the $200,000 to cap the sprinklers that for the grass and leave the ones that are near the trees would actually be a cost-saving measure based on the fact that it costs a contractor $300,000. And so I'm just trying to see if the staff time and cost is comparable, and if we can present this to council as both an improvement to the tree watering situation, but also as a cost-saving measure for our city.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just generally speaking, I haven't ran those numbers, but if we did a cost-benefit analysis of the staff time it's taking now to do the work, the cost if we were to hire a contractor to do work versus the $250,000 to do the sprinklers, I think it would be money well spent, in savings to our staff time for other things.
So I would suggest that we ask that analysis be done and be brought to a future ETAC meeting and agendized so that we can possibly make a formal recommendation.
I would like to include one recommendation to City Council, repairing the trees and bringing them back to standard and during this drought. so that it is maybe a big plan, but at least it covers all points, and they can decide. Recommendation from Public Works on this matter?
I'm sorry. I'm concerned about another motion and another formal recommendation around something that's apart from tree planting services because it wasn't agendized.
So when we set the agenda was to be covered in a 3-part basis, and it was reforestation, service of the trees, and education. And those 3 points were supposed to be set for the agenda as the overall looking for the trees. So what you're saying is the way that the agenda is worded, it doesn't cover those 3 points?
That's correct. Item D was specifically for supplemental funding for city tree planting services. It has a recommended action of a motion, which we've passed. And so I'm concerned about making a motion and further discussion about now talking about trees that are not just city planting services, because we need to publicly agendize and post. I don't even like the word agendize isn't even a term. We need to add it to a future agenda and post it publicly in order for us to take action on it.
Wouldn't this, we thought the ongoing maintenance would cover the watering. That's what my understanding is. It, is on the agenda here that vacant trees and an ongoing maintenance cost. So the watering is ongoing maintenance cost.
That's correct. So for the motion that we made and passed, those are for new trees and include the ongoing maintenance. Janelle's talking about city median trees that are currently existing, and about ensuring that the watering either services or infrastructure can provide adequate water for them. But that item, I think we need to maybe discuss at item F for agenda items for future meetings, make it very formal that we would like to see this on the next agenda, and then create a motion then.
So we have the pleasure of having a city attorney here, so let's refer to city attorney.
Good morning, my name is John Funk from the City Attorney's Office. Mr. Salmon is correct. To the extent that this item differs. Hi, good morning, members of the committee. My name is John Funk from the City Attorney's Office. Mr. Salmon is correct. To the extent this item differs or goes beyond the item of new business that has already been discussed and passed, it would need to be properly agendized and the public be given notice under the requirements of the Brown Act.
So then the next thing is the education needs to be agendized as well, the outreach education programs such as the video we've seen here, or specific handouts in our gas bill or at our doors or neighborhood associations. So we need a cost also to an outreach program, and I request that this be added to next month's agenda, these 2 items.
I suggest when we get to item F that we cover those things, and I know in the past we haven't been very clear about what the agenda items should be for the next meeting. I think when we get to item F, we should be very clear about those items and do E and then get to that.
To make it clear, so we'll come back with the cost of the first item, now that we have an opportunity to do that. So you can discuss that. What would the cost be, the item that was approved? And then we'll also add 2 new items. And let's make sure we're clear what those items are. So one is watering medians for the city. Another one is an educational component of outreach and educational.
Outreach campaign, educational on how to save water and save our trees during the drought. And component pieces such as what we've discussed in the past of labeling the trees and giving directions to customers, which our customers are our residents, on how to take care of the tree. Waldo used to knock on doors and talk to the folks on a one-to-one basis, but I don't think we have that capability with 2 people or 3 people down in Public Works at this time.
Fred, I just want to make clear the item or the comment you just made was that we would bring the first item back. Was that around reforestation and education, not around the motion we made earlier, correct?
We're going to calculate the cost.
Of
because
the
we don't-
motion we made earlier?
Yeah, and just bring it over for your information that we calculated it and the cost is whatever it is.
I just want to make clear that that motion was to make a recommendation to City Council, and so it should appear on the next City Council agenda.
Because we're going to make all of these recommendations at the same time, I think that's the best way to go. We have to wait for the first one. We have to wait for these 2 other items so we can put them all in one staff report later. So we have an opportunity to bring back the cost if you want to take a look at it. Just for your information purpose, what would be the cost of the first item that was passed? That's all. If you don't want to see the cost, that's okay too.
I mean, I think the reason the motion was amended was because the true intent here is to get a certain number of trees planted and maintained, and so I think all of us up here trust that staff will figure out what that would cost and be able to present that to City Council in an appropriate fashion, and so my preference would be that that motion with an official recommendation from ETAC to City Council be presented to City Council as early as possible at the next City Council meeting.
If I could, my only concern would be that if we do that, and then in a month or 2, we come back and say, oh, now we want to talk about the median trees, and then a couple months later, now we want to talk about the trees that are maybe downtown in the area, that they may say, no, we have to wait till next year to bring that up. And I think, from my own personal point of view, is that there's a big issue in Santa Ana with maintaining the trees, no matter where they are. And I would rather come to a conclusion that is more broad-based, that includes the median, that includes that the trees were missing and the stressed, and make a bold proposal to the city to maintain all of that at once. So that's my point.
It was my understanding that the city manager had a sense of urgency in coming back because of his presentation for his draft revision of the budget. Would anybody be interested in calling a special ETAC meeting, since the mistake of not adding all those 3 components to the agenda, that we discussed that those 3 components would be incorporated in the agenda today?
I would be open to meeting soon, in the next couple of weeks for a special meeting to cover those items.
I would be unable to attend that. I'm going to be out of town for a couple of weeks. I really think that this is a really important issue, and we need to have a totality of all the components we want to go to the city council on, once and for all, and we need to have the input, the numbers, at a predetermined time, whether it's at the next DTAC meeting, which would be the second Tuesday of September. I don't think a lot of trees are going to get planted between now and then, but I also understand, Janelle, what you're saying, that this has been going on for a period of time. So
this has gone on since November of last year.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to have all of these costs as soon as we can, and by the next DTAC meeting, and make a total recommendation to the city for all the components we're talking about.
I still would like to ask the city manager, because he had a time frame in our meeting.
I don't believe there was the time frame for new appropriation. I can check that and let you know. I don't think that's... I think we have time to bring this item back in the next session. the ETAC can make their recommendations, and we have time to incorporate everything in one RFCA and take it to council in probably first week of October or the second week of September council meeting.
So then, do we want to move on through the E and address E and then spend a little time on F because there's more component pieces we'd like to add to the agenda for next meeting?
Well, before we move on from item D, then I would like to maybe make another vote on item D then to hold off on presenting the recommendation from ETAC that we've already voted on until a future meeting.
Can we make that an emotion so we can
Sure.
vote it and add it to the minutes?
Sure. So I motion that we hold on presenting the recommended action to City Council from ETAC until the City Council meeting following the next ETAC meeting, so that it can be presented as part of a larger package of recommended actions.
I'll second that. The only thing I like to add to it is that the educational part, I think, will take more than just one meeting to discuss and what we want to do, but don't see that being a large cost myself. So if we come
So
back,
that's moved in second. Is there any discussion to that motion?
Okay, the next ETAC,
We need to vote.
I thought there was discussion.
We are in discussion right now, correct? We
I'm
made a
sorry,
motion, we had
were
a
you
second. It's
repeating
open
the
to
motion?
discussion.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Okay. So you want to make a recommendation to City Council, as I understand it, after the next ETAC meeting. Is that correct?
Here's my concern, and maybe the city attorney can help us with this. We've already voted on a recommended action to City Council in this meeting a few minutes ago, and I worry about a precedent where we vote on recommended actions to City Council and then say, never mind, don't send it to the City Council to see. And so I would like us as a board to officially vote on waiting until the next ETAC meeting to include this action as part of a larger action.
I don't think the ETAC committee voted on the timeline that is going to go in front of the council. We voted that this moves to the council according to the timeline that is there, and we didn't have it as is supposed to go to council the next session, or if in August or September.
But in this motion, it's my understanding he's putting a timeline with the second motion here.
That wouldn't work because we can't set a timeline here. We don't know what the schedule is. We don't know a lot of factors.
I don't believe there was a timeline attached to the first motion, but if you wish to clarify that matter in a second motion, you may. With respect to the comments made by the executive director, it would not appear to be the case that you could make a specific date on which that item would be brought before the council, but it would be possible for you to entertain a motion in general terms as to when and what that motion or what that matter should include.
Like the next available date.
So I withdraw my motion, and I open it up to other board members if they would like to set a certain timeline on it, and we'll talk during item F about what the agenda items should be for next meeting.
As far as if there were conversation that what kind of a PR, public relation or educational component, you said it might take a long time to discuss that. One way to tackle that is to set aside certain amount of budget for education and then later discuss how would be the mechanics behind it so we can move this item forward.
I need a little clarification right now. So really what we're saying is, and I don't know if we need a motion to say this or not, but you're going to come back next meeting with all the costs, and then we're going to vote on it. Is that correct?
There would be a discussion regarding 2 additional items.
When we get to F, we agreed that when we get down to F, we'll go through the agenda items specifically for next month.
And there would be a vote to take all of those items to council in the next session, and then we'll queue it up for the council at next session. The first item is already approved. There's 2 other items that the chairperson wanted to.
Just for clarification, what do you have to go through to get to council at this point? You have to present it to the city manager, and then he presents it, correct?
It would be I don't know yet, but it would be a recommendation of city managers backed by ETAC. And it would be recommended to council that ETAC is recommended to set aside certain amount of budget for these specific tasks, and the city manager would decide where the money is make recommendations where the budget is would come from to pay for this. Most probably would be general funds, and then council would make a vote or make an amendment or whatever they wish they would like to do on these items.
So we're at E on the agenda. So any further comments? Any public comments? Staff comments? Committee member comments? Now we're at F.
I,
You want to start?
Yes.
yeah.
Hello, Izzy.
Yes, Fred, can you just, for our edification, tell us where are you at in the process of presenting to the city council the road program you showed us about 3 or 4 months ago?
Okay, so we had 2 programs. One was the Smart Santa Ana, which was the pavement improvement, sidewalk improvement, bike master plan.
And
Is that
that's
the
right,
package
that
you're
was the
talking
one I
about?
was asking about, yes.
Yes, so we took that to council. I believe it was a couple of sessions ago. The council unanimously approved to move forward to the next step. The next step was to take this item to a financial advisory consultant to check the numbers, to make sure that we will be able to bond the amount that we said we were going to bond, the source of bond, and then all of those financial part of it. And once that's verified by advisory committee, we're going to bring it back to council for the final vote to move forward. And I believe that was an item that was pretty much favorable by ETAG. So my hope is if you are supportive of the program, also make sure that is heard by council. Meanwhile, we'll take in this item to different neighborhood committees. We've been having a conversation and presentation in a number of different places to make sure that the public is basically informed, get their feedback, and then make the final improvement to the proposal when it goes to the council next. So that's where we are now. The schedule is William. What is the schedule to take it back to council? I believe in first week of September. 1st September.
Yes, the first meeting in September. I believe it's September 6th. We're planning on submitting to the council the cash flow analysis, which Fred's talking about. We have a financial review that actually we're going to be reviewing this week, and we'll make sure that we have sufficient revenues to support the bonding capacities that we were speaking about. So September 6th, if we have everything, all our ducks in a row, and we present to the council, and the council approves it, then we would proceed with the actual financial transactions, engaging a bond consultant so that we can move forward to actually getting the $80 million for this program.
No, thank you very much. I mean, that's exciting to hear that it's, getting closer and closer. I mean, I get so much feedback from residents in several HOAs that I manage in Santa Ana, and they, are all very supportive and asking about this. So thank you for letting me know where it's at.
I appreciate it. We'll let you know where it stands. And then, as I said, it would be very helpful for the council to know that there are community support for the program. We hope we get some comments from different HOAs and member of council and the residents as well. And we'll let you know when would that be. Also, another component of that is SAMHSA, which is the safety, for pedestrian and bicyclists. That item is also scheduled to go to council very soon. We don't know when, because we're having the city attorney checking some of the language of the report. That's a very important report, and as part of Smart Santa, which is the pavement program, we would be able to jumpstart that program to the tune of $14-15 million, because there are overlap work involved with that. That item is, we're hoping to take the final version of it to council probably in first week of October, first council meeting of October. Now that on that subject, we've had some requests from information regarding SAMHSA. I just wanted to make a general comment that some of these master plans we bring to this committee to get your feedback of what's missing in there, is there anything we should add, and it's not in a final version, and it wouldn't be in a final version until we get everybody's comment, we run it through the city attorney's office, and then we'll take it to council, have the council approve before we opening up and have it as a public document. So please keep that in mind. Sometimes the information that is brought here is not for general public consumption as a policy of the city, because it needs to be approved by council first before it become a policy.
So I want to make a comment on that, and I think I'm next anyway. Because you're referring to some Public Records requests that Public Records Act requests that I had made. Danelle, I really appreciate your responsiveness with one regarding trees, and then I'd asked for a copy of the Santa Ana Safe Mobility presentation. It was already presented to a city council committee and presented at and agendized and presented at a public meeting, which means that document is now available to review by the general public. And so I understand that nothing's final until council approves it. Nothing's even final then, because there could always be more appropriations following that. But I just wanted to respond to that, because I made that public records request as sort of as a private citizen rather than as ETAC commissioner, and it was a very frustrating experience because it's already been presented publicly at a public meeting. So I was hoping to talk with you after the meeting about it. But I think we should be very responsive when people ask for items that we review as ETAC commissioners. If people put in public records requests for them, then I hope all of us here on the board are on the committee are very supportive of the public seeing those documents, because once it's here, it's public, even if it's in draft form. So, and city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's how I understand it. So as part of my comments, I wanted to understand there was an item on the agenda last meeting about the bylaws for the committee. I wanted to see what the status was on that.
Yes, that's something that is still in the review. I just provided with the city attorney's office a markup, and so we're working together to see what kind of revisions are necessary. I also have the commitment from the city attorney's office, and I don't want to put any words in John's mouth, but when the bylaws are ready for presentation, I believe the city attorney's office may be present so that we can answer any other questions that ETAC may have.
That'd be great. And
Yes, we're working with the public works staff, including William, to advance those as necessary. As to your comment about the document you referenced previously, I'm not aware of the current status, but I'll certainly advise the public works staff as necessary.
the other question I had was around another item that was on the agenda last meeting, but continued to this meeting, but didn't appear on the agenda this meeting, which was around the Santa Ana Safe Mobility Plan. And so I'm curious why it wasn't agendized when it was continued from the previous meeting to this one.
We don't have anything to add on that item at this point. But if you would like for us to bring back a certain segment of it, we would be more than happy to do that. Would you like to discuss that in the next meeting?
We can talk about it during item F. I was just surprised to see an item continued from one meeting to the following and not have it appear on the agenda. And then the last comment I have is just to, in the sake of transparency, to share that I had a one-to-one meeting with Chair McLaughlin on just as a general get-to-know-you about general items in July, and I made sure to let her know that I didn't want her meeting individually with everyone, so that we stayed away from serial meeting laws. And so that's just as a public sort of transparency thing. Thanks.
I'll make it short. Two items. The jacaranda tree at 422 North Linwood Avenue, I reported about a couple of months ago. It's dead. Do you have any idea when that's going to be removed or replaced?
It's one of the ones on our removal list.
422 North Linwood Avenue.
Sorry. Yeah, it's on our removal list. As far as when, I'd have to get back to you as far as when we can get it down. Probably within maybe a month or two. I don't know. I have to look at our list and talk to our staff.
Could you send me an email?
Yeah, I can send an email to the whole.
Right. Okay. Because residents are asking me and don't know what to tell them. Okay. Thank you.
I can do that.
The other item is a few months ago we talked about, you mentioned that the city was in the process of talking with Edison in terms of buying utility poles, I believe. How's that coming along?
We are under final negotiations to establish a final price for the purchase of the streetlights, and I think that's what you're referring to.
Well, yeah, the reason I brought it was one of the residents on the corner of 14 northwest corner of 14th and Grand. There's a utility pole, and they had requested a light on there because it's very dark. And at that time, you mentioned that you guys were going into talks to purchase some of the utility poles, and it's been about 3 months now. So, is it time to put up a light now, or should we still wait on that?
Let me get back to the ETAC body as to exactly where we stand, and that's because we're under final negotiations. This has been about a 1.5 to 2 year process of purchasing the street lights. So we hate to put in a request for something that may not even meet our own standards. Our idea and plan is to purchase the street lighting system and over some time upgrade it and bring it to a better operating standard at a cost savings. Mm-hmm. So we're at that final stage. So let me look into the matter. I recall your request for that location. So let me see where we're at with that.
Okay, it's the northwest corner of 14th and Grand, right in front of. It's a corner right there. It's a residential area.
Okay.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
I was very excited to see the city attorney here today, hoping that we're going to move on this ordinance request. Is there a timetable that you see, Bill, for us to discuss this?
Are you referring to the bylaws and the ordinance?
Yes, it's been a long time.
So the whole idea is, again, to bring back the bylaws in a revised form. If there's any additional questions that ETAC may have, we will have our attorney to answer them and maybe make a tweak or two. We take the bylaws and the ordinance, and we would report to council. And as far as the legal requirements to actually approve the ordinance and bylaws, maybe our attorney John Funk can answer that. But hopefully, if we can have something at the next ETAC meeting, then thereafter we would schedule on the city council agenda approval of the ordinance and update of the rewrite of the bylaws.
I'll just add quickly that both would be subject to approval by the city council in the ordinary course. The ordinance, I believe, which amends or speaks further to the duties of ETAC, and then there would also be an accompanying resolution approving the newly amended bylaws.
Do you have an idea when you'll be presenting it back to ETAC?
I would defer to. I'm sorry. Will you repeat your question, Vice
Well,
Chair?
my question is, what time do you expect to come back to ETAC?
That would be dependent on our work with a public works staff. At this point, I don't believe I would defer to William as to when he thinks that might be when we might have a date.
Because I think Bill will agree it's been a long time coming. We've had lots of discussions. It's been a long time. So
Yes.
Bill, do you have timetable?
Yes, it's been a long time. I would target the next ETAC meeting because that's the next possible open date that we can address that. But it just depends on our workloads are sometimes pretty heavy, so I'll work as best I can with our city attorney's office and bring that back as soon as possible.
All right. Just want to comment, there is a lot of things going on in the city right now. I just was caught by surprise on 6th Street. I guess I don't know if it's a water line or sewer line is being replaced on 6th in Flower on it. I'll head to Bristol. So there's a lot of activities going around the city right now. I think it's a good sign that we're an active, busy city right now. That's all I have.
Thank you. I have 3 questions of the city attorney. Since our ordinance for ETAC and trees is reporting directly to city council, how is that done? Do we report 4 times a year, or what is the procedure? Because we discussed that last meeting of exactly what the procedure is of the reporting to city council.
That can be determined, I believe, on what would be in the ordinance. My experience have been usually once a year, all the committees will go in front of the council and report on the annual progress of the committee, unless there's pressing item that they would like to report to council more than that. But it usually is an annual basis.
So you're saying like the planning, the historic, all the committees go once a year?
My experience have been with other committees, not with the city planning. They have their own committee. I don't know. They don't have any immediate reporting or annual reporting to the council. But
their rules are that they report to the planning, is my understanding, not directly to city council. So is it my understanding, city attorney, that the ETAC is the only one at this time that reports directly to city council regarding the trees specifically?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of the ordinance before me to fully address your question. But as to your question, as to the protocol for reporting, as the exec director has stated, that could be something that would be contained in the ordinance if you so wish.
I guess define reporting, it was like an annual general report of the activities of the committee. Is that what you're talking about?
Just that last month when we got our minutes and our documentation, it was broken down that we reported directly to the city council. So we asked last month, how is that done? And we were going to ask the attorney because he was here, and that was information that we were moving from last month to this month.
The council, the committee would be advisory to city council, not
Correct.
directly reporting to city council. It would be an advisory to
correct.
city council.
A Citizens Advisory Council.
That's right. So, like for instance, on the issue that you brought up, when we turn that into a staff report, we'll take it to the council and we'll say this is the recommendation of ETAC in terms of trees. And that would be the basically reporting and requesting council to make a decision based on that. But then there is a annual reporting, a general reporting of activity of ETAC.
And when is that?
That can be determined. You can have it semi-annually, you can have it annual report. Basically, generally what goes on the ETAC, the decision that has been made, the progress, or whatever conversation you would like to have with the council. Usually is an annual basis.
Any comment from my fellow board members?
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chair. The bylaws indicate that, or the proposed bylaws do indicate that ETAC shall act in an advisory capacity to both the City Council and the Executive Director of Public Works. That language is dependent on the ordinance as is proposed now being adopted by the City Council, of course.
City Attorney, do you have, because those proposed bylaws and ordinance have not been passed by the City Council, as it stands, I believe we're currently acting as an advisory capacity to City Council with urban forestry and tree city matters. Can you just give some clarification on that?
Your current role would be defined on however that is defined. Mm-hmm. I would defer to William for some elaboration on that. I don't have that document before me right now, but perhaps say our staff or the exec director can elaborate.
Yes, committee member Salmon, you're correct. The way the ordinance reads now, according to attorney review, it's urban forestry advisory to council only.
Janelle, just to follow up, you asked for a comment. I don't think in the past we have reported to council. I think we should on an annual basis. Also, that brings up another point, too, to everyone sitting here on this board. Don't forget to let the person who put you on this board know what's going on, whether it be just a quick little email. It's good to advise them we are going to be coming up with this tree ordinance or this tree concern. So let your person know.
Thank you. My second question is that there was some discussion of, let's say, a committee to talk about trees. The Public Works Director said it had to be a 3-member committee. Where does it say it has to be a 3-member committee that is a committee seeking information or on a project? It used to. What happened is that in November of last year, we, as ETAC, brought out 2 members that would discuss trees specifically with Public Works. We had 2 meetings, and then we were advised that we could not have any more meetings because it was required to have 3 people at a meeting. 1 person or 2 people could not be at such a meeting.
Just point of clarification, you're talking about the time when there was an ad hoc subcommittee created. There were two members on that ad hoc subcommittee. You tried meeting with staff about it, and you were told that that would constitute a Brown Act violation because it wasn't a public meeting and there weren't enough people to hold a quorum of the ETAC meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. And there was two kinds of meetings that you can have as committee meetings that was described. Can you clarify the two kinds of meetings and what's required by them?
Madam Chair, I believe the bylaws, the proposed bylaws, endeavor to clarify that. I believe you may be getting at the distinction between an ad hoc committee and a regular committee meeting. I think the proposed bylaws do attempt to clarify that as to the meaning of that and the conditions under which that committee can be constituted and formed, constituted, and meet.
Since we have had no bylaws for the past year, what determines what we can do moving forward? Can we...
Can you provide just a very quick summary on whether it's admissible under the Brown Act for us to create an ad hoc subcommittee that has fewer than 3 members?
I think for me to do that, it would be necessary to review the current bylaws. I don't have them in front of me at the moment, so I'd like the opportunity to do that before providing that advice.
So I would think it would be a good idea also to just for general information of the committee to have a presentation on the Brown Act maybe, what's constitute the violation of Brown Act, and then just bring that back and have that presentation, if you will, sometimes down the line.
Certainly, our office can provide that type of a seminar or workshop or whatnot.
So, for example, we're going to add maybe 7 or 8 things to the agenda for next month. If we would like to, let's say, have a meeting within ourselves for trees of what an educational campaign consists of, or some kind of meeting aside from our general meeting, how is that done within the next 30 days?
Any meeting would fall to the requirements of the Brown Act, and so that would have to be properly constituted and noticed before your next meeting, or I should say, any meeting you should have before that would have to be conducted under the requirements of the Brown Act.
So how does that work if the co-chair and the chair would like to sit down to review agenda? How does that work? Can we review agenda prior to a meeting? And does that have to be announced?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd recommend that you work with the Executive Director of Public Works on that, and I think they can provide you the necessary direction.
I think William can respond to that. I think there was a meeting is scheduled with the chairman, previous chairman, and with previous chairman Dan, and another member of the committee to discuss agenda item. I think we can still do that.
Yes, the way it was being handled before is we would schedule a meeting with a staff member, generally Fred or myself, a chair, and another committee member, and we would set aside, I think 2 weeks before the ETAC meeting, we would meet and we would discuss in general what the items on the agenda should contain. We would consider workloads. So it was a meeting that we would have, again, 2 weeks before, and so we'd be happy to entertain having a meeting like that.
Excuse me, madam. Many years ago, when I was a chair, that's what we used to do. That's not being done anymore? Hasn't been done? Wow. Okay, that's what we used to do. We used to meet with the director, the chair, and the vice chair at a breakfast for an hour, and discuss the agenda items. That has not been done.
It has not been done in the last few meetings, but it's been done this year. Early in the year, yeah.
Because that's been the process that we followed in the past.
We can do that. Yeah, that's no problem there.
Okay. That's how we used to do it,
So can we put a request in that is our new procedure, that 2 weeks prior to our ETAC meeting, that the chair, co-chair meet with the appropriate Public Works people to review agenda?
Yes, we can do
And
that.
that goes in our meeting minutes. And the third thing is not receiving minutes. We've gone to 3 meetings and haven't received minutes. And so now that we're recording minutes, how do we get printed minutes now, or do we just go on and log in someplace to receive and review minutes from the recorder? What is our new procedure?
This was the first meeting that I had difficulty preparing the minutes. What were the previous meetings? Because I know Tom Morrissey had brought up that there were no meeting minutes prepared for the month of March. Well, I went to the month of March because I was a little confused. I went to the month of March, and there are meeting minutes for that, but they were revised, and in April you were given, the committee was given the corrections from the month of March. So we don't go back, and I clarified this to make sure because I was a little confused as to what he was referring to. So I went to the clerk of the council, and after presentation with the corrections, they don't go back to the original commission. So the corrections were in fact made, but they weren't given back to you for review. I'm not understanding what is the reference.
So there was no vote on those minutes until corrections were to be made, and they were to come back and the corrections to be made to vote on. I believe while you were on vacation, the young woman that replaced you did not have minutes of the previous meeting. So, in fact, we've had 2 meetings without minutes and 1 meeting that had non-voted on minutes brought forward. So, from that point forward, how do we do this now with recording these minutes?
No, there were minutes. They were incorrect.
So we're behind on the minutes that were incorrect. We're going to bring that back up. We're going to catch up with that. We've been delayed on that process to bring everything up to date. From this point forward, when meetings are recorded, we're going to put down the highlights of the meetings, very brief, and then we'll make the recording available. Action minutes, and then we make the recording, the full recording, available for public to have access on in perpetuity.
Are those minutes available at the 2 weeks meeting prior to ETAC that we review agenda? So we would have minutes at that meeting at that time.
Yes, we'll bring it back. We correct it. We'll bring it back and have the voted on.
At this time, I'd like to recap the agenda items that we'd like to make on F. May I ask any committee members that they would like to add to the agenda of next month?
So I propose that we start with the Santa Ana Safe Mobility Plan that was continued from the previous meeting to this one, but not agendized. And especially because we have such wide-ranging responsibilities, both environmental and transportation. Because this meeting was heavy on the environmental front, I suggest that we start and dedicate a large portion of the next meeting to the transportation issues, or at least start with them, right? So I would like to see the Santa Ana Safe Mobility Plan on the beginning of the next meeting, as well as the bylaws reinstating the transportation matters to this committee.
Is there any specific item that we should bring back on SAMHSA, safe mobility?
So you presented Smart Santa Ana at a previous meeting, but not the Santa Ana Safe Mobility Plan that was presented to, in the past it was presented to.
Got it. Okay. So I thought, for some reason, because I've been giving these presentations here and there, I thought we presented it last time, but we'll be more than happy to present the SAMHSA brief portion. and then take your comments on that. I think it's a very important program to actually consider.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that and the bylaws for the proposed bylaws that we reviewed at the previous meeting and sound like need further review.
Thank you. Adding to the agenda, we were bringing forward the median trees in detail, and that whole cost issue. We were bringing this is point 4 for the agenda. We were doing an education outreach program and what that consists of and budgeting it. Education outreach of Save Water, Save the Tree program, the cost, and the plan.
That's one component?
Education is one, outreach is the second one, and the cost of each one.
Okay, thank you.
The next item that we had discussed at our meeting with the city manager, and I'd like to bring forward on the agenda, was the planning department, the wording that we would add to the planning department on developers' responsibility of setting up a deep root watering of their new trees that are on streets. And there was a specific wording that the city manager had asked for to be done by Public Works. So I'd like to review that wording and put that on the agenda. Following the next request.
So to be clear on that one, you want to know what's the requirement right now as far as the private development is concerned in terms of watering trees. And you want to see if it's not sufficient. We want to add components to that and take it through the process to get it part of the private development off-site improvements in terms of tree maintenance. Is that correct?
So what the situation is every time a development program gets presented to ETAC, we have the street trees that they pay for, but our city is required to water them and take care of them. And we reviewed that in other cities, their requirement of having a water system implanted to those street trees at the time of development was what other cities did, and the city manager added that as an agreeable component to put to the planning department.
Yes, we've revised our city standards. I believe they were revised in February or March of this year. So whenever we have street trees that are planted by developers, the deep root watering system is already a requirement. That's been consistent now. We went through a revision of a number of standards, and so that was one of them. And so as far as I'm concerned, we've made that adjustment. We'd be happy to provide that standard language.
Would you provide the
meeting.
standard language? Because in our meeting, Mr. Pedro didn't know about it, and that was one of his action plans that the city manager asked of him.
I'm sorry, who was... Oh, okay.
Pedro, Pedro was in that meeting, but we can verify that and bring it back. Right now, it is my understanding as
Please
well
bring it
that
back, and we'll add it to an agenda item for next month. Then also
to see what the ordinance is in terms
exactly
of
how it reads and what it is.
private development, tree planting, and the maintenance. We can check that and then bring it back in next meeting. To just
Yes.
verify what you said.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Then the next thing that we covered at that previous meeting prior to this with the city manager was the 4,700 trees that are in poor condition, and breaking it down by species of how many trees by species are in poor condition, and what is the Public Works plan to handle the by species, and we're talking about not broken limbs but disease, and proactive to these sick trees. So that was part of our discussion with the city manager. So I'd like to add that to the agenda. And then the next thing to add to the agenda that ETAC had requested a break.
Just to be clear about your previous comment, would you please repeat that so the secretary can write it down properly so we can bring it back?
There were 4,700 sick trees. Within that 4,700 poor condition trees, we were told that that consists of broken limbs or partial, but also such as the oak tree that has the beetles. How many oak trees do we have in that 4,700? And what's being done to protect from the beetles, from the tanglefoot, for the oak trees? Specifically, sycamore has the anthracnose. What is the plan of Public Works to take care of those by species? Very good, sir. Again, going from the city council, the city manager conversation was that the recommendations from the species book, we're still getting from the planning department sycamores recommended to plant. And Pedro said, well, it's not the Public Works decision to choose that sycamore to plant. It's the planning department. So my question is, what are we doing to advise the planning department, such as the sycamore is not a drought-tolerant tree in its early years and the high rate of death of that tree? So what are we doing to the planning department to guide them through drought-tolerant tree selection? And that was a component piece that was at that meeting.
I wasn't at that meeting, but if I can just get clarification so I understand what you're asking. Are you talking about for like private development projects and plantings?
Correct.
Okay, because that species book is for the parkways.
Correct.
So you're talking, okay, I just wanted to make sure you were talking about the private property.
So what we're noticing is that they're planting, multiple sycamores, and we know as a city and as Public Works, those sycamores are having trouble within our city. So what are we doing to educate our developers and offering them drought-tolerant solutions? And that's the responsibility of a ETAC to work with that. So that's added. And then there was a request that we had asked that we had the tree count by neighborhood, by ward, in the broken down of good, fair, poor, dead, so that each of our ward representatives on ETAC can work within their city council or their neighborhood associations to better communicate. So 3 months ago, that was requested of Public Works to provide for ETAC. So I'd like to agendize that. Thank you for the extra time. It's going to be a possibly late meeting next month. Would anybody be interested in starting at 7 instead of 7:30, since we all have jobs to go to?
I'm curious if we briefly discussed a possibility of a special meeting to discuss all those tree-related matters. I'm curious if other people on the committee would be open to having a special meeting to discuss all those items you just brought up. Maybe the week before the ETAC meeting is scheduled. And I'll remind committee members who will be out of town for that you can always participate over phone.
I would think with those number of items that we do have that we were not going to cover this in just one meeting. So I would be interested in a special meeting. I'd be supportive.
I'm definitely supportive of a special meeting. Dizzy?
Well, let's look at the calendar. Because when is our next meeting? The 13th, I believe. The regular meeting is the 13th. Is the week prior to that? Is that Labor Day weekend week?
Weekend before that would be Labor Day weekend. Labor Day week would be that Monday.
It would be the 6th, September 6th. That Tuesday.
Can we tentatively set a September 6th?
I don't know if I could be here on the Tuesday. So, I mean, you guys could have it, but I don't know if I can. I may be out of town that weekend.
Ordinarily, the chair reserves the right to call a special meeting. I don't know if if that is your intent, Madam Chair. Then you
Within the
ordinarily would
minutes,
have
I had
the right to call that
within the meeting, I asked
or a
if they
majority
would.
of the members of the
Correct.
committee. But
So I request a special meeting. May I request a meeting for September 6th at 7:30 in this room to have the tree agenda? And along with that, may I request,
I'll have to check the room calendar to see if the room's available or another room is available.
Madam Chair, your request would only be subject to availability of facilities, of course, and public works staff, ordinarily.
okay?
Do we need a motion for that?
Yes. Right?
Yes.
The chair can call a meeting on her own, or alternatively by a majority of the committee members, but it would appear that the chair is calling a meeting on her own, if you'd like to clarify that.
So all members will be so notified?
In the absence of a current provision on that subject matter in the bylaws, I don't have a current copy before me, but I know they've been substantially, or as proposed, substantially rewritten. It would be possible for you to make a motion for that. Also, would appear that the majority of the committee members at least would second that or be in favor of that. So I
make a
recommend
motion.
that to clarify your intentions.
I make a motion for September 6th at 7:30 for a specific tree agenda meeting as the 8 items that so noted here to review.
Madam Chair, can we have clarification? And you also want to meet on the 13th for the regular meeting?
And we'd like to meet on the 13th of the regular meeting. And the items on that meeting also is for the bylaws as well as the Smart Santa Ana Safety Mobility Program.
I'm sorry, not the Smart Santa Ana. Yeah. Safe mobility.
I'll second that motion.
Right. So for clarification, it would be... For clarification, it would be the trees on September 6th would be the trees in detail, the education outreach and costs of each. The planning department, your request for a deep watering requirements, but William had indicated that the standards have already been revised. So that would just be an update.
And the 4,700 poor trees
Well, I'm not
and
there
to
yet.
space
So
by
it would be-
species.
It would be the Williams update verbiage only for what has been already changed in the planning department. Is that correct? And then the Public Works plan to handle the 4,700
As
sick
well as the
trees, or those
breakdown
are-
of the trees in the neighborhood by ward.
Okay, I also have the designated trees, the drought-tolerant tree species direction to the Public Planning and Building Agency, and the tree count.
And I love the recording. She dumped that in.
Pardon me?
Jumped ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So you made a motion and there was a second.
So moved.
No, we need a vote.
I don't believe there's been a vote on that yet, Madam Chair.
May I have the vote, please?
Who seconded it?
Second it.
Okay. Vote.
Ask all those in favor.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No, I won't be here.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.